Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a new episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. I apologize that it's taken so long between episodes, the last one being Halloween itself. But again, my work schedule is crazy. I was actually going to do one last night, and then I got called in at the last minute. But we are going to have an episode tonight. This isn't going to be a specific type of night because there's a couple of things I want to talk about that don't really merit their own episode, but I think they're kind of cool. Um, Things I ran across while researching other things or commenting on something. Funny enough, in fact, we're going to be talking about two of the last witch trials to happen. I mean, I've talked already about how McCarthyism and the Satanic Panic were witch trials, but when I say these are the last two of the last witch trials, I mean actual bona fide. Somebody was charged with witchcraft. One that took place in England, and one actually that took place in the United States, in the most obvious place in the United States to hold a witch trial. Um, because it's a funny world and things happen that way. And we're gonna just talk about whatever else comes in my head. Uh, Probably go an hour or so, as I usually try to do. But for the moment, like I said, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Mears, the Paranormal Encyclopedia. If you haven't heard of the channel, welcome aboard. We are a paranormal. I'm a paranormal talk show. I have had in the past many guests. I'm going to be working on getting that going again in the near future. I have to figure out how now that no now that some of the stuff that in terms of doing things on YouTube has changed and I'm no longer on Hamilton Radio. Um, but the first thing I wanted to do is give everybody a recommendation in terms of something to go check out, and as well as promote a buddy of mine. So a good friend of mine, as are my long-term listeners should know, is a guy by the name of Lupus Creepus. Lupus has had a long-running show here on YouTube. He actually started before I did, I believe, called Will It Kill Me? Will It Kill Me is about taking ritual pastas, all those goofy little stories you hear about, how, if you go to a church, well, probably the most famous example, and it's an example of one that's folklore. Folklore would, of course, be Bloody Mary or Light as a Feather Stiff as a board game. Many of us did as kids. I certainly did. Ouija boards, often in haunted locations. But he does these things on video, sometimes live, to see what happens. I like Lupus a lot. He's a really good guy. And I also like that he plays it straight. He doesn't mess with things. He doesn't fake things. He videotapes what happens as he sees it and leaves it honest. He, to be honest, hasn't really caught anything paranormal, although he's had some very odd experiences by his own admission. But at least it's honest. When you watch TV and things of that nature, it's so much of it just fakes results. Which I get it. It's in TV they if you need ratings if you want a show to survive, and for ratings people want to see the paranormal. They don't want to see somebody standing in a dark house in the middle of the night going, if there are any spirits here, give me a sign into a recorder, and nobody saying anything on the other end. But it's a breath of fresh air to see somebody like Lupus, who isn't playing that kind of thing. He's also a lot of fun. He tells his own creepypasta stories that he's read on there in the past. He just started up again. He's going to do them about once a month. First one was Halloween night, with one that's supposed to kill everybody who listens to it, or at least have some other bizarre effect. It's a cute little story. Nothing happened to me, but there may be reasons for that. Maybe something will happen to you if you listen to it. I make no promises if you get haunted for listening to the story that is supposed to make you haunted, although I can try and help if it does. So the two particular stories that caught my attention, and I'm like, this is really interesting, and I want to do a video about it, then I'm like, there isn't that much information here. It's going to be hard to make an entire video about it. One is a woman by the name of, she's known as Helen Duncan. Her full name was Victoria Helen McRae Duncan, who was a medium in Scotland, who was... and here's what makes Helen so famous. In 1944, she was one of the last people to be convicted under the Witchcraft Act of 1735. So basically, she was England's last witch trial. Yes, in the 1940s, in the middle of World War II. Now, the story of why is actually kind of interesting. So, Helen was very typical of mediums of the First and Second World War era, where she would produce ectoplasm, where she would claim to speak to spirits of the dead, do table tipping, and things of that nature. All of which were easily explained then and now. But there's a particular story about the sinking of a British battleship. Let me get the name of it. Yes, HMS Barham. In 1941, she was holding a seance at Portsmouth, and she claimed to have a sailor from the Barham appear to her and declare that it had been sunk. What made this a big deal was that, while it was true that HMS Barham had been sunk, it was still considered classified. The information hadn't been released to the public or to the press. The only people that knew about it were the family of crew members who had lost their lives, who the U.S. government had contacted to tell them what happened, and got them the promise that they wouldn't talk about it. So the British Navy, started taking interest in what was going on, and members and 2 lieutenants went to a seance in 1944. They were reportedly not impressed at all. One of them, a Lieutenant Worth, talked about a figure in white cloth that had appeared behind the curtain, claiming to be his aunt, but he had no deceased aunts. Another figure claiming to be his sister, who was alive and well at the time. He was disgusted by the whole thing. It was reported to the police, and then that was the 14th of January, and then January 19th, undercover police went in and arrested her at another seance. Particularly, another figure in a white shroud appeared, and when they went to arrest her, it turned out it wasn't a ghost, it was her in a piece of white cloth that she quickly had tried to hide. Now, the thing that they ran into is there was some concern at first that maybe there was a intelligence leak. Most historians, and I'm inclined to agree with them now, think, yeah, it was supposed to be secret. It wasn't that secret. There was enough people. There's the old saying, two can keep a secret if one of them is dead. There are a couple hundred people that knew that the Barham had sank. It wouldn't have been that hard for her to find out. The reality of the situation was she was a fraud, and they wanted to put her on trial for being a con woman. They did, but specifically the law they used was the Witchcraft Act of 1735. What's interesting about the Witchcraft Act of 1735 is it actually is less about outlawing witchcraft and more about outlawing pretending to be a witch. Specifically, the Witchcraft Act had a stipulation that pretending to contact spirits of the dead was illegal. So she wasn't tried for summoning spirits so much as pretending to summon spirits. And she did in fact go to prison for it. Another woman by the name of Jane Rebecca York, of Forest Gate in East London, was accused and was convicted of 7 counts of pretending to cause spirits of the deceased person to be present. And then they threatened to use the act again in 1950, and then 51, it was repealed with the enactment of the Fraudulent Medium Acts of 1951. Well, basically because of spiritualists wanting to be more specific, and then it's since been brought into a larger law about fraud and not specifically mediumship. Since really immediate fraud is fraud, it doesn't matter if you're pertaining to the dead or what. The other woman, Jane Rebecca York, what makes the two different is Duncan actually went to prison for witchcraft. York was fined. She was fined £5 and placed on good behavior for 3 years, promising she would hold no more seances. The light sentence was because of her age. She was 72 at the time. Yeah, and there was a big argument at the time, particularly about how useful the act still was, with prosecutors putting to this in Helen Duncan and saying, yes, see, it's still useful. There is still the reality of the charge you were charging them under was witchcraft. That's a little weird. The other example that's rather... Hold on. And it's actually it's older than Duncan, is the witch trial of 1878, which happened here in the United States. What makes this one particularly entertaining, first of all, it was a civil case. It was not a criminal one. And it took place, I'd say guess it, but I don't think I have too many people listening at the moment. But it took place in Salem, Massachusetts, believe it or not. This is kind of interesting, particularly because it was members of a cult/religion at the time known as Christian Science. It's considered the last witch trial case that was held in the United States. And this is very different than the English case. This is not them claiming that it's fraud. They actually believed that this Daniel H. Spofford was using supernatural abilities to harm the person. There was this belief at the time. There's this belief within Christian Science in the older idea of mesmerism. I mean, modern terms, when we say mesmerism, people tend to think of hypnotism. And while hypnotism is kind of weird, it is actually a pretty well-established, legitimate thing. But Mary Baker Eddy, the woman who started the Christian Science cult, had this idea of animal magnetism, which came from Anton Mesmer himself, the man who discovered hypnosis. But animal magnetism was supposedly a way of manipulating people, in particular, with magnets, with other sort of more paranormal forces. And Edie developed this idea of what she called malicious animal magnetism, in which mental energy could actually harm people. She wrote about it, in the 5th chapter of the original edition of Science and Health, with the key to the scriptures, where the mind can cure but also harm others, calling it mind crime apparently, and that believing much such mind crimes could be stopped by having people in close physical proximity to her to intercept those mental emanations. She spent her whole life worried about it, but a woman by the name of Lucretia Brown, who was 50 and living in Ipswich, about 12 miles northeast of Salem, who had an injury to her spine as a child that left her an invalid, but claimed she'd been healed through Christian Science. When she suffered a relapse in 1877 and 78, she turned around and accused Spifford of having interfered through this power of magnetism, and she sued him. At least one witness claimed that Edie's own attorney drew up the complaint for Brown, although Edie herself denied that being the case. And there is debate. Some modern scholars do think that it was without her influence. Others think that, yeah, she was behind the whole thing. It took place at the Supreme Judicial Court in Salem. Edie and then 21 other witnesses traveled to testify against Spofford. He was ordered to appear on May 17th, get large attention in the media. Appeared in the Boston Globe, among other things. The attorney of the man accused filed a demurrer with the court, arguing there was no question in equity and the court had no jurisdiction in the case. The counter-argument was that mesmerism is acknowledged as a fact. And Judge Gray, the judge in case, dismissed it, noting it was vague, and the complaint framed without knowledge of the law of equity. The court ruled it was not clear how it could prevent such mental control, even if it were to imprison Spufford. Brown's appealed the ruling, but the appeal was dismissed, and then in November dismissed in '78. The whole thing is just bizarre. It's mesmerism. Hypnotism is fairly well established and does have effects. But this mystical idea that the person was using it to influence from a distance, that even as the court pointed out, even in prison he would have still been able to do it, is pretty ridiculous. And certainly not scientific. It is basically witchcraft. I obviously agree with the court's decision. Christian Science itself is a pretty weird cult, and I'm sorry, but it really is. They believe that disease itself is an illusion of the mind, that you can overcome it by changing the way you think and improving your behaviors. Moral behaviors, not in terms of like nutrition and exercise, and actual behaviors that will benefit your health. There's been a number of cases where various children have died because their parents denied them medical treatment based on this group. I want to double check. 1 second. Jim Henson, who was raised as a member of the group, I remember hearing when he died that his belief in it, although apparently he had, is generally thought to have left, he had actually written them and formally told them he was leaving the religion, but supposedly he refused to take medicine that would have saved his life because of his belief. He died from strep throat just days after the infection. Medicine would have almost certainly cured him. It's quite unfortunate. But aside from that, on the lighter side of the news, because this is by far one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard of, and or more bizarre decisions I've heard of, and I have to comment on it. So, if you have a kid who's struggling in school, especially if they're struggling in the sciences, I highly recommend at the moment moving to Ohio, because Ohio just passed a new law. Let me look it up to get the right name. So Columbus, Ohio lawmakers passed the Student Religious Liberties Act. Under the law, students cannot be penalized if their work is scientifically wrong, as long as it's part of a sincerely held religious belief. Now, some people are saying that this is a terrible thing, and it's travesty of the American education system. I mean, I don't agree. I think this is a great thing. I think everyone who has a child should move to Ohio. I'm personally hoping to find out a very important question is, does this only apply to science? And the next most important question is it only for high schools or does it apply to public universities too? Because if it applies to public universities, I want to move to Ohio, and I want you all to help fund my tuition. I absolutely guarantee I can get a 4.0 because every time I get a question wrong on any test, my answer is gonna be, it's my sincerely held religious belief that I'm right. And so you cannot grade me down. When was the universe first formed? 2 weeks from tomorrow. Who's the first president of the United States? Zeus. 2 plus 2 equals Apple. I sincerely, religiously believe everything I just said, so you can't give me a negative grade. I mean, think about it. Ohio could have the highest grade point average in the country. Every student can have a 4.0. All they apparently have to do is pinky swear that that the wrong answers are all their sincerely held religious belief. What more does a student want? This is a carte blanche to never study for another test. All joking aside, obviously this is an idiotic idea. Even if you believe young Earth creationism, as ridiculous as it is, think it through. Are you really saying that you think that students should be able to give any answer to a scientific question as long as they can claim it's religion? That doesn't just mean they can say the Earth is only 6,000 years old. They can say the Earth is flat. They can say that Satan is the cause of all disease. They can answer any scientific question any way they bloody well want. What are the legislatures in Ohio smoking that they passed this law? I mean, if any idea, if a student says any idea, no matter how ridiculous and stupid, is their sincerely held religious belief, and the teacher doesn't immediately grade it as correct, that student now has a built-in lawsuit. And I'm thinking the ACLU will jump at the chance to pursue it for them. I mean, for heaven's sakes, it's the way they wrote the law. This is why I and many other people are rapidly losing faith in public education in this country. Because here's the thing. Intelligent design or creationism, and really they're the same thing, has been consistently struck down in court. There was a big case in PA in 2004, Kitzmiller versus Dover, where it was decided that no, you can't teach intelligent design in school. Just because you call your religion intelligent design instead of creationism doesn't mean it isn't religion. But the sad reality is there are biology teachers that do it anyway. There are ones that just talk about the Bible. There are ones that just don't talk about evolution at all. They're fundamentally not educating children properly based on their own religious belief. And it's a mess. Which actually leads to, I think, the last topic I'll probably get in. Maybe the last two topics I want to get into for tonight. One of which is a topic I've discussed before, and it's actually a really good, surprisingly difficult question to answer, which is, what is religion? Because you have a common argument from creationists that evolutionism is a religion, or that they're evolutionists. And it's a little hard to refute because there isn't a single universally agreed upon definition of what is or is not a religion. Usually, it's a system of belief. It's a system of deeply held beliefs, with rituals relating to the creation of the universe, life after death, and things of that nature. But there are groups that very much resemble religions, that have the ritual, that have the something, not necessarily a god, but some force, cause, or ideal morality, belief that they hold very seriously. Some have even been willing to die for those beliefs. Most notably, one group that isn't a religion by most people's standards, that a lot of scholars debate whether or not it should be considered a religion. Old school, I don't mean. I'm not going to weigh in on the whole democratic socialism thing, but actual communism, under Stalin or Mao, it's not technically a religion. You're not worshiping the state, but the entrenchment of the ideals, the idea that the state is something bigger than you, that the common good is something to strive for. People were willing to die for how importantly they saw communism. I mean, this isn't. There are plenty of people, just like everywhere else, there are plenty of people that weren't overt as gung-ho about it as others, but it is decidedly a political system that did foster a great deal of adulation in some people who did treat it in ways that are very similar to religion. For that matter, in Stalin's way that he approached it, the state did occupy many of the positions traditionally held by the church. But generally speaking, a religion is seen as a collection of rituals, beliefs, particularly encapsulating a system of morality and the nature of life after death and the origin of the universe. So science, because I refuse to call it evolutionism because that's ridiculous, is a set of beliefs about the origin of the universe. There is no inherent set of morals to evolution. There is no set of there is no belief in an afterlife or lack of a belief in an afterlife in evolution. Evolution doesn't address in any way, shape, or form whether or not there was a god, or actually, in point of fact, the actual biological theory of evolution doesn't even address whether the origin of the universe. It exclusively relates to the spread of the diversity of living things on this planet. It doesn't address where the first living thing came from. It doesn't address where the universe came from. It doesn't address where the planet Earth came from. Just how populations diverge from each other over time, from theoretical first living thing, or possibly group living things. There's at least an argument that could be made that it was a couple of types, not a single one. But the point is, evolution is not a religion. Even if you think it's wrong, and you can see the other videos I've done on the subject for why it isn't. But even if you think evolution is wrong, it doesn't fit into the definition of religion. There's no adulation, there's no worship, there's no ritual, there's no set of morality, there's no God. The only thing there is a set of beliefs about the origin of living things. Evolution is a very important idea to a lot of people, particularly a lot of science are very focused on it, very interested in it, devote entire careers to it. But if that's enough to qualify something as a religion, then me being I am apparently a Star Wars chin, whatever that would mean. Or you're a football worshiper, or any interest you have becomes a form of religion. In which case, the term religion loses any meaning it ever had. It's a ridiculous idea. Atheism for itself is not, for that matter, is not a religion. Individual atheists can be very similar to religious people, and there are plenty that are. Atheism doesn't preclude religion. There are atheistic religions, the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple, and some forms of Buddhism are all atheistic. But atheism itself is simply the rejection of the existence of God or gods, or any other similar force. This is an important detail that my friend Stephen Cray likes to go on at length about, and I agree with him completely. Atheism is God. Central question: is there a God? If your answer is yes, you're a theist. If your answer is no, you're an atheist. If your answer is anything else, you're maybe, I don't know. That's agnosticism. It's not atheism. There is this idea that there's such a thing as an agnostic atheist or a gnostic atheist, which is if you say that you don't know if there's a God or not, but you're inclined to think there isn't, or there isn't enough evidence for a God, you're an agnostic atheist. If you say there's absolutely no God, then you're a Gnostic atheist. By the same token, a Gnostic theist is someone who knows that God exists versus someone who isn't sure but believes in God. This distinction is ridiculous. The concept of agnosticism was developed in the 19th century by Thomas Huxley. When he coined the term, he meant people who weren't certain of the existence of God. The new atheist movement, particularly spearheaded today by Aaron Ra and Matt Dillahunty and their camp, has chosen to embrace this new definition of agnosticism that, as far as I can tell, was really championed by Christopher Hitchens. But most atheists, all agnostics, and theists on the planet don't agree with the stipulation. They'll go, oh, well, the definition's changed. It's like, no. You're trying to change the definition. It hasn't actually changed in the general mindset. And it certainly hasn't changed in an academic sense. If you talk to sociologists, if you talk to philosophers, if you look at polls and studies done by Pew and groups like it, they all firmly make a distinction between the two. You cannot really be an agnostic and be an atheist. I don't know if there's a God. There is no God. The two don't work. If you reject the existence of God or gods, you're atheist. If you're not sure, if you think maybe, you're an agnostic. And here's the other reason why this is ridiculous. So, here in the real world, where we don't invent arbitrary distinctions like not agnostic theist, Gnostic theist is redundant. There is a religious sect, arguably, at this point, it largely is a branch of Christianity. Originally, it started as a heresy and arguably, possibly a distinct, marginally, by marginally, maybe 1 or 2 centuries old, older religion known as Gnosticism. Gnosticism was actually somewhat similar to modern New Age beliefs, where they took Middle Eastern ideas and added in Eastern mysticism. So you had Judaism and later Christianity mixed in with Taoist and Buddhist concepts. They have their own gospels. The Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Mary, were all Gnostic Gospels written in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. That promote very different ideas of Christ than what's found in the actual canonical Gospels, and which is which and why we pay attention to the ones we do is a whole other discussion for another night, and for that matter is already on the channel. But not, if you're talking about a Gnostic theist and you don't mean a member of the Gnostic religion or denomination, in my opinion, you're wrong. It's like, no, they're not a Gnostic theist. They're just a theist. A Gnostic would be a member of one of the monastic religions. All of this relating back to the fact that the word not gnosis in the Greek means knowledge. So agnosis, or agnosticism or agnostic would be without, a means without knowledge. I don't know. Whereas theism is belief in God, or atheism without belief in God. Which is where the counter argument largely comes from. Is it's like, well, no, it just means you don't know, and don't know, and you can be an atheist. It's like, no, if you're taking a position on the subject, you're not an atheist. That, I don't know, but God doesn't exist is not really agnosticism, in my opinion. The other thing I thought, probably going to cover before, probably not. That's worth another episode in its own right. Let me think. Is there anything else? I may wrap it up. It's been a little bit of a shorter episode. We are getting going again. I am trying to crank out episodes. I'm doing it as often as I can. It's the realities of how much time I have and when I'm free, given I usually don't know I'm working until the day of. Sometimes I don't get that much notice. Like I said, I got a call last night, and it was wake up because I had been expecting overnight, so I was, and I'd done some things, work-related things overnight the night before, so I had expected to sleep during the day. It's like, get up and get dressed and go to work. There was no notice. It was, you have to go now. Somebody didn't show up. There is one other thing to comment on, just because I find this intensely funny, and I actually turned another good friend of the channel, Virgo Triad. I turned her at him. Ken Hovind, who I've talked about more than once, and did a whole video about how him and Ken Ham are directly damaging Christianity. But Kent is apparently moving forward and trying to get his conviction for income tax fraud overturned. There's a whole YouTube channel, Ken Hovind is Innocent, and a website apparently by the same name out there. What is absolutely hysterical to me about this is the argument is that tax laws are illegal, therefore he doesn't have to pay them. Not that he didn't actually. He's not arguing that he didn't commit tax fraud. He's arguing the law doesn't apply to him. He's basically resurrecting the sovereign citizen arguments he used to begin with. Which is nonsense. One second. Let me quote why this is nonsense. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without appointment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. If you're wondering what I just quoted, this would be the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's mentioned elsewhere in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, representatives and direct taxes shall be appointed among the several states which may be included in this union, according to the respective numbers. Article 1, Section 8, Chapter 1, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, excises, and to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties and imposts and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. And Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4, no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless proportioned to census or enumeration, which is overrun by the 16th Amendment, and really just relates to property tax. But the bottom line is, yes, the government has a legal right to lay taxes. Kent's argument about his taxes is as ridiculous as his arguments about science. The man is a crank. And given he tells cancer patients that taking doses of cyanide will cure them, under the nonsensical idea of vitamin B17, which is in fact amygdalin which is a chemical found in seeds, particularly apple seeds and apricot seeds, that when your body digests it, breaks it down into cyanide. Um, there's no rational reason to take anything this crazy person says seriously. Um, the only real claim to expertise he has is the fact that he proclaims himself to have a doctorate. In reality, his doctorate's from a diploma mill run out of the back of a trailer. If you don't agree with me, watch any of his more recent debates and notice how whenever anyone asks him, hey, where can I find your doctoral thesis? He always switches the subject. That should tell you something. But I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight. I know it was a little on the short side, but I'm a little under the weather at the moment, so I'm going to get going. I want to remind everybody once again to check out Lupus Creepus' channel since he is finally back after about 2 years. Just starting Season 8. Should be very exciting. I'll put a link in the description below. If you like the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you have a little bit of money that you're not using, feel free to donate it. You can do that at patreon.com/paranormale, patreon.com/paranormale. There are more episodes coming and more things coming, more interviews and stuff of that nature. Hopefully, I'm hoping to set up something where people can call in to ask questions if they're so inclined in the near future. That's going to do it for tonight. Tune in again soon, hopefully sometime later this week when I'll have another episode. But until then, good night, everybody, and God bless.